I'm a member of the PRISM committee and have been for about 18 months. And in previous roles that I've had, I have helped and supported organisations of all sorts of different types to develop strategies and implement strategies. And so I possibly foolishly said, oh, shall I do that here? And they said yes. So that's what I'm doing. And I was going to start by being a bit disparaging about this little presentation, which I assure you will be quite short because I know everyone wants to go for lunch. And I was going to say that I think it's, I was going to apologise and say I'm sorry that it's probably going to be the least inspiring bit of today, because obviously we've had these like really brilliant speakers and practice that's been going on. But actually I've changed my mind, and I think that I hope that you will leave a little bit inspired, not least because of the work that the PRISM committee has put in to developing this strategy, but also the kind of level of ambition that they hold for the organisation, for its members, and for the future. So that's my sort of introduction. And so a strategy. Why, when, what, who? We're doing this for a number of reasons. So the first thing is that the network is maturing. It's 5 years old, and as Isabella said earlier, it's grown quite massively over the last few years. So from 290 in 2022, I think, to well over 1,000 now, and that gives us a kind of a sense of momentum and movement that we want to take hold of. We want to get a shared understanding of our sense of direction and how we are going to get to where we want to be. So trying to answer some of the questions that have just been being discussed in the panel. And I'm going to steal a phrase from Rika earlier, who said intentionally shaping our futures. So this is our sort of moment, particularly with the Research Professional Futures project, to think about how we as a network intentionally shape our futures, both sort of individually and collectively. And I mentioned Rika and Isabella's involvement, particularly in the Research Professional Futures project. That's a really important and significant milestone for PRISMs and for the network. And the reason for thinking about developing a strategy now is also to think about how we leverage that and make the very most of it. So we are planning to finalise this strategy over the next sort of month or so, and to publish it early in 2026. There's going to be a session on looking at it in a bit more detail, an online session in January, I think. So if you are a strategy nerd, or you want to know more details, or you want to be involved, because I think it's really important to say that whilst this strategy is being developed by the PRISM committee, as we've just been hearing, it will only, the kind of aims and goals will only be delivered if everybody in the membership and beyond is part of actually doing it and supporting it and advocating for PRISMs and for what we want to achieve. So yeah, so there'll be a session that you can look out for in January, where we'll also be talking a bit more about the survey. And so before then, I'm going to just give you a little overview of where we've got to and how we've got there. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. Don't worry if you can't. I just like pictures. So it's been a kind of iterative process to develop this strategy, and we started it at the beginning of this year. We've had 2-hour online workshops, we've done prioritisation exercises, we've had Mentimeter quick surveys, we've developed theories of change, we've presented bits and pieces to our advisory group. So we've been kind of coming at it from lots of different angles, and we've also been thinking about the survey responses that we had, that Isabella mentioned earlier, to see what they tell us about what PRISMs want and how we can, as an organisation and as a network, can advocate for that. We are now at the point where we have really sort of worked through our prioritisation, and we've tested the goals that we've got, the goals that the network had initially, and we have started to look at developing theory of change models that say, okay, so this is our goal, but what does that actually mean? What would it actually look like in 5 years' time? And how would we get there? What do we need to do to actually deliver what we want to see? And we hope that that is then going to form into a narrative that we can share and you can share and that people can share that presents a really clear message of what PRISMs want and what they need and how we think we can get there. So it's still evolving, and you'll see from the next couple of slides, I've written draft in big red letters on it because we're still kind of iterating and shaping it. But I hope that I'll be able to give you just a little bit of a shape of what it's going to look like. I thought it would be useful just to share, as part of the kind of work that's gone into developing the strategy, some of the survey results from PRISM members about what they thought, what you thought, were the sort of top 3 opportunities for improving the work and lives of PRISMs. And although we had, I think it was 180 responses on this one, because we asked for 3, we got nearly 500 individual ideas that people put through. And so we've got this really clear top 4 list, which is not going to surprise anybody. But it means that we've got a good, strong message, and that is recognition and value is the most important thing that people want to see improvements in. Career progression and pathways, we've obviously been talking about a lot today. Training and development, and job security and improvements in contracts. We did a similar exercise with the committee, albeit asking slightly different questions, but I think I'm not going to kind of dwell on it, but obviously we got to the same point, as Isabella said earlier. There's obviously, we're not sitting there kind of not getting the message. I think it's clear. I was just going to mention some of the sort of things that people had said about recognition and value, career pathways, all of which we've heard a little bit about today, but the sorts of things that people are asking for in the survey and that we want to make sure are kind of at the heart of the strategy are more formal funder and institutional recognition for the real contributions of PRISMs and other third space professionals, and the impact that they make to research projects was one of the responses. In relation to career progression and pathways, clear career progression within PRISM roles is recognised professional career pathways alongside academics and technicians. And say job security. So one of the responses, stop seeing PRISMs as short-term employees and provide them with the same opportunities as other employees. PRISMs often end up being at universities for many years and their value should be recognised. So on to the strategy. We've got 3 key goals. The first one of which being increasing recognition and influence, and obviously that is about valuing. So what we want to see is formal recognition of PRISM roles by the UKRI funders particularly, and also by institutions. And we've got this thing that again was mentioned earlier around the value gap. So in the survey, what came back was that 79% of PRISMs feel valued by their teams, which is pretty good, but 33% by their employers, which I don't think any employer would be happy to have that sort of feedback, and that gap needs to be closed, and by bringing up the value that employers have for PRISMs. So in 5 years' time, what we're looking to see is that UKRI funders have got published expectations for PRISMs. We heard it's starting to happen, but what we want to do is kind of build that movement, and that they are included in calls and grants, and that institutions have clear policies for costing and including PRISMs in bids. I've personally been involved in a process that was very clunky and difficult, and as we've heard, academics always really supportive. It was actually professional services colleagues that sort of stood in the way, so we need to kind of break down that barrier, and then just wider sector awareness and parity of esteem for PRISM. So that's what success would look like in 5 years' time. We think that local PRISM networks are really valuable and important in doing that. We want to be able to kind of leverage the Research Professional Futures project, so thinking about how we can, the relationships that are going to be built with funders can be used in that, and just strategic funder engagement. So whilst all of these conversations are happening and everyone is advocating for themselves, as a network, we want to be able to have the voice that then can say to funders, and this is what you need to do, and this is what we need. So that's increasing recognition, improving recruitment and job security. unsurprisingly, we want an end to unnecessary precarity, and we want to increase diversity, something that we've been talking about today, and we will continue to talk about as a committee and as a network, because it's really, really vital. And embedding progression into roles. So the kind of evidence that we've got from the survey is that although the fixed term contracts are reducing, what that is often meaning is that it's moving into open-ended contracts, and that isn't always reducing precarity. It might be just moving the goalpost slightly. So we need to understand that a bit more. And what we want is obviously fewer fixed term contracts. We want there to be sector level progress towards tackling the kind of precarity around projects that means that people end up having to leave just before a project ends, which is no good for the project, no good for the person, no good for the institution, etc. And for there to be some really clear public commitments from employers around fair and inclusive recruitment. And to do that, we want to advocate this pooled model, and we want to engage with the leaders of Universities UK and higher education institutions so that we can get better data on the risks and the value, so building that kind of evidence case, and developing and co-developing a career framework and accreditation, and to be able to amplify the minoritised voices that we have been hearing about today. And then finally, stronger career pathways and professional development. So the aim is a national PRISM career framework. Obviously, the details of that are still to be resolved, as we talked about earlier. But again, some other sort of disappointing data from the survey about how people feel around their career progression. That again, employers would not want to read, and that we think we can change. So we want institutions to be using their national framework as a benchmark. We want PRISMs in 5 years' time to feel and to be able to report that they feel that they are getting the skills and the training that they need. And we, as the network, want to play a part in that, and in continuing to deliver the training that people say that they really have valued. And what we also want is to make sure that PRISMs are visible and seen as role models and mentors for people. I'm conscious that it is lunchtime and everyone's shut up. So, I'm not going to go into the sort of next steps. You can imagine what the next steps are. You're mostly programme and project managers. But if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, I've put my email address on there. I would love to hear any sort of ideas that people have. And on that, I will stop.
Probably accommodate at least one question if there's anyone in the room.
Sure. I'm really interested in one of the actions that you have about working with local networks and institutions as well. How can the PRISM network support those networks? Because of course there's time involved from those network members as well. But I see the value that it can deliver. So what kind of support that the PRISM network hopes to give to those local networks to run? That's one. And the second thing is the name of PRISM itself can be a little bit hard for people to relate. Like you can see there's more research project managers in the PRISM. So how does that link? Because we have, like, for example, the University of Manchester has a research project managers network, but not a PRISM network. Does that still work as a PRISM network? Have you thought about that in the strategy as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's something actually we were discussing just last night, and I have been discussing today, because it is tricky, and there are lots of Venn diagrams that we need to kind of navigate our way through. And this issue around the kind of local networks is, and how, as a sort of broader network, we support that has only come up actually quite recently. It obviously, I think, is a really powerful tool, because you kind of to get out to people who are able to give those messages. We don't have the detail of exactly how we're going to do that, but I think what we've been discussing is the idea of there being resources and being that kind of hopefully that evidence base that local networks and local advocates and champions can be aware of and can draw on, and that we can sort of produce that perhaps at a network level. But yeah, watch this space.
So thank you so much, Poppy, and especially for all this work around the strategy. And it's actually been really fun, actually being in the strategy workshops. You've had a really good way of getting us to get the information that you need to put this together.